Hi, everyone. We're going to get started with our first review of Milestone 5 assignments. Milestone 5 is a little bit different than the previous milestones, as you probably have noticed. It's a week and a half long, and we have 3 tasks for Milestone 5. And so the tasks are the final drawing. And this is the first installation of the final drawing where what you're doing is actually just experimenting with some different options, some thumbnail sketches for your final drawing. And what you're going to do is pick one that you like the best for your final composition. So typically when you do this process, this is a really common process. You'll notice we do this in a lot of our classes where in the final you develop some kind of concepts or different ideas that you then choose one and refine it. And we do this because as designers, we're often trying to explore a lot of different options before we settle on one. And sometimes we show it to the client and we get their feedback and then we rework it because we don't want to necessarily invest a whole lot of time into a solution that is not maybe like the best thing that we can get. Plus, I think that when you do a whole bunch of different solutions, you tend to really loosen up um, your creativity. You get more ideas, and you oftentimes really can happen or stumble along um, really better solutions than if you just focused on one single idea. So that's what we're doing here. But in other ways, you'll notice that this assignment is very similar to Milestone 4 in terms of the requirements, um, where we're adding a cast shadows and ellipses and a scaled figure, and we're doing an interior. But you can in this assignment explore either 1, 2, or 3-point perspective. So you have those options, and of course, you have total freedom over the composition. So I think that's it. So this is going to be the first task. And once you choose one of your compositions, then you're going to turn that into a line drawing for the next task, like just a simple line drawing. And, adding cast shadows. And then in the final task, that's when you're adding the shadows. So please don't jump the gun with that and start adding shadows earlier because you want to give yourself lots of opportunities to refine your composition, add more detail, make corrections as you go. And you'll notice the more you add your cast shadows and shading in, the harder it is to go back and revise. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to say. You're also going to have a story or an idea, which I notice some of you have, and some of you still need to write that. So, just kind of like your overall, let's see, what does the assignment say about that? Uh, Before starting your thumbnails, choose a concept for your final project. What story would you like to tell? How can you visually convey your subject matter? What are your goals? And there are some examples, if you go scroll down, which you probably already have seen, but just to mention them, here are just some examples of the thumbnails, and here's the concept that goes along with each of those. So this one is a deep space, number of different rooms, interesting architectural elements. Um, and this one here says that they're going to focus on a cozy interior, um, small, quaint cabin. That's the intricate detailing. So that's the kind of thing you want to be aiming for here, is to try to give the give the class an idea of what your interior space is going to be. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, Sabrina, let's just see what you wrote here. Let me just get this a little smaller. So you're going to accomplish an open space basement. Oh, that's a nice idea. 2 or 3-point perspective, pool table, bean bags, drawer. Light source, sort of challenging since hanging lights are throughout the entire thread, and couch-wise. Yeah, so oh, I like the idea of vintage hippie vibe. Yeah, that's great. So that's a very good concept. That's exactly on track. Okay, so I just opened up in the Photoshop so we could zoom in a little bit more. Okay, so this looks like a 1 point here. Here's your VP, good. Okay, yeah, so I like this nice open space. So I would say something to keep in mind is just in terms, I think that, let's just look at all of these first. I like the foreground element here. Oh, 3 point, yeah, that's intriguing. Good. And okay, so in all of these, I think that to me it looks like you've got your, it looks very accurate in terms of the perspective, which is great. That's exactly what you want to do, is to have, nice, accurate perspective, even if it's rough at this stage, just like so you have set up your vanishing points and you get a sense of that. What I would say is, think about how you can maybe anchor your sketches a little bit more with like larger items. You have like a lot of kind of open space, which is what your idea was, but maybe kind of balance that with maybe like filling in the space a little bit more, so you have maybe like larger items, objects in there. Like I like what's happening here with your bean bags. I could see you pushing that a little bit more. Um, like maybe pull in, you know, some elements closer to the foreground, for example. Like closer in. So maybe your table would be really close to us, to just again try to really, you know, have more. When you have a lot of emptier space, it's harder to make a drawing come to life because we don't have a strong focal point. So I would try doing that. Maybe have some more overlapping of your objects as well. That can really help starting to ground things. Like, with your bean bags, maybe you have a really big bean bag that overlaps the other ones. Um, that kind of thing. So I would just focus on that a little bit, bigger objects and overlapping, to try to just tie the elements together just a little bit more. What overlapping does is it actually groups things, which will really help in bringing your composition to life. Let me see if I can show you an example here, what I'm talking about in the. So, in this one, you can see, even though the elements are further away, even the flooring starts bringing it closer to us. In this one, you can see little bits of tables, a rug, it sort of brings the space close to us. Here's the bit of a table. That kind of thing really starts to bring things um, closer to us, and then sort of tying things together so that elements start, forming a larger composition, bringing the space closer together. Okay, that's what I'd work on a little bit more. And just one last thing, don't forget to put in your scale figure too in each of those. Okay, Jesus, so let's see. Okay, 2 point perspective, but you did 1 point perspective. Warm feeling in a bedroom, bunk bed. Okay, good. Yeah, that sounds great. I like that idea of drawing on a memory. Uh, and okay. Yeah, I see what you mean. I do like this 1 point as well. There's something that really kind of um, just, you have a lot of nice detail in here. I think your use of light is quite good, and it has a very strong sense of accuracy. So I like that one. I think that could be a good one. And And overall, I think these are all looking pretty good. I like your sort of sense, your compositional sense of, bringing things forward. I think you could even do that a little bit more. Like, this table, for example, or this element, you could bring it closer to us just to give that sense of foreground space. Foreground, middle ground, and background is just the sort, you could divide the space of any composition up into 3 layers. Any composition that has a sense of realistic space, and you have the middle ground and background. And this one, for example, this has a great example of foreground where this is coming right towards us. It's like right in our space. I like this element right here. I think that's really nice. So this one's, I think that's working quite well too. Um, Overall, I think these have a nice quality to them, and they do have a warm sense. You mentioned bunk beds. Were you planning on putting those in your drawings? that could be a really interesting element to add, I think. Like for this one, with the shelves on this side, a really nice table. You could have maybe your bunk beds on the right-hand side. I like how you started dealing with the ceiling in different ways. I don't know what element you're planning to put up here, but I think it's an intriguing idea. Is this going to be maybe a window or, um, yeah, almost looks like this is a dartboard there. I think that's because of inscribing the oval. But okay, well, so those are my suggestions. I think you have all the required elements. Just, think about working a little bit more with the foreground space, with whichever one you choose. I love the idea of the bunk bed. One of the reasons I like that idea that you mentioned is because bunk beds are square, they're very geometric, and I think that would be really, you could get a really precise, um, you could really work with the vanishing points that way. Um, and I like the details you're starting to think of adding, so I would just keep going with that. And yeah, good job. And I think just go whichever one you like the most. I do think, if you like the 1 point, I would just go with that. Hey, Lauren, let's just zoom in here a little bit. Okay, so just like I've mentioned in the intro, you just want to make sure you've got a concept. And if you're thinking about something, just write it down. You could post that um, if you want with either this task, just post below what you've written. Don't wait for the final submission to post your concept because we'll need it throughout the week 5 just to see what you're planning on doing. And or you could put it in task 2 along with your submission, whichever you want to do. Just think about it. It looks like you've sort of got an idea here of what you're doing. Um, this one seems to be working pretty nicely. I like what you're doing here with this. It looks like kind of like a planter. Is that right? It's cool with these kind of like sort of upright looking plants coming up, and you've got a little, kind of um, bit of some type of little cabinet here, some doors, and the ceiling. I like the way you're working with all the planes of a composition. I do think that really brings it to life. So I would just say, make sure you finish all 4 of these. This one, yeah. So when you're working on a composition, I think sometimes with interiors, when you're starting perspective, there's a sense of like you make it looking like you kind of flip it so you're looking almost like an out exterior, and that it unfortunately doesn't turn into a good interior. It's really hard to do. So in your case, so what you would do here, you can just pretty much work with let me just get a better color here, with the colors that you, or pardon me, with the VPs that you have, but instead of going inwards, you would want to go outwards. So for example, we could go like this way. So I'm just going to take and make the walls go this way. So actually I would probably, let's see, I'd probably take the VPs, and just kind of move this one especially outside of your picture plane a little bit more, maybe move this one out. You'll find it a lot easier to work with if they're a little bit further out. Okay, I'll just put, it's, this is going to be the VP. And then so here would be the walls out this way and this way. I should use 2 different colors for this. So actually, maybe I will because I think it's too hard to see. Um, okay, let's do that again. So this would be the space. And you can see what's happened the way I did it. So you can see actually what's happened here, and this is actually a good lesson because I wasn't even anticipating this, which is a good reason to have the thumbnails, is that we don't have very much interior space here. You can see it's just a tiny little corner. So how do you fix that? Well, you would go back, let's go back here, take this out, and instead of having this line right here, we would move that line somewhere else. So we would take and maybe move this. So this, instead of this wall being, this corner being here, we would move it, let's move it right over here. And then we can, maybe change our vanishing points so that we've got more space. Sometimes it's easier to actually put your, kind of sketch out your space first and then add your vanishing points later, so to get a sense of that. Something more like that. So I would just develop these other ones here. Maybe just do some 2-point perspectives. Think about your concept a little bit more, and I think you'll be fine, once you develop this a little bit more. Hey, Katie. All right. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah, these all look really good. Just like I mentioned previously, just want to make sure you've got a concept. Just looking at these, compositions without knowing your goals, or what story you wanted to tell, I would be inclined to go with maybe this composition or this composition. I really like how you're starting to get, in this one especially, a little bit more foreground. This one too has a little more foreground. You could continue to kind of move this table towards us, um, but you know, these two also just have a really nice sense of space, and I like the windows. I don't know if these are all windows or art, but whatever they are, I think they would be, you could continue to add details to them. Think about, looks like, okay, looks like the fireplace here. Maybe think about where your light sources are going to be in these guys and add a little bit of detail indicating that, like you have here. Um, oh, you added a little bit here. Oh yeah, there's a little bit here too. Yeah, so I see some of that. Maybe this is the only one that's missing it. Um, okay, so that's it. I think you've really got a good structure here to whichever one you choose. Um, and just make sure you've got an ellipse in all of them. That's the one thing I do see that you want to just make sure you have. But you've got scale figures, which is great. Okay, Rebecca. Yeah, definitely the shading, it really actually doesn't matter so much in these thumbnails whether you started to shade or not, because you are going to be redrawing, you know, one of these into a line drawing for the next assignment. So really, I think that's fine. Um, okay, I like all kind of like sort of the way you started developing these. There's a certain kind of charming quality to these. Make sure that you've got your concept. Maybe you want to include what the type of space you want to work with. Um, just looking at these, this is the space I think automatically I start feeling is the nicest compositionally, has just a nice feeling to it. Um, Although I like what's happening in this one where we're starting to get a little bit more foreground elements, closer to us, which I think you could maybe emphasize in any of these. Like maybe with this one, you could have your sofa a little bit closer. Draw these, you could sort of draw your elements a little bit larger right in here, and that would start bringing the space, filling the space a little bit more. Um, If so, this is the one I think would work really well. This one feels a little bit cramped, like this back wall is a little small. So if you did this one, I might suggest, starting when you start, make this back wall a little bigger, like just fill it up a little bit more. So, um, your space gets a little bit more expanded. Same with this one. I might start with your back wall, maybe make it a little bit bigger. Um, And you've got a scale figure, you've got ellipses. It looks like you're starting to think about the light source, which is awesome. Maybe this window, it looks like maybe this window here, you want to just make sure that falls in where your vanishing point is. I just sort of guessed it was here. It looks approximate, maybe just, yeah. I think maybe you free-handed this rather than adding a vanishing point. So just make sure, even on these thumbnails, when you're working with these, it's really a good idea to start with a vanishing point and use it. It's first of all, it's great practice, but it also will really clearly show you how the space is going to be developed. So I would actually go through and just make sure you've got vanishing points and horizon lines with all of these guys. Um, and if you need some help, which I understand, it's been a while since we constructed 1 and 2 point perspective, just go back and, use those videos and just, follow along and, set up your horizon line vanishing points and draw your shapes in. Okay, Jera, let's see. A few challenges. I used a chair, couch, desk, bookshelf, mirror, clock. Okay, yeah. So maybe talk a little bit. It's great to list the items, but also think about the space you're creating. Like, what kind of qualities will it have? Will it be open and airy, or more kind of compressed and cozy? Maybe be tall spaces, modern spaces, more kind of old-fashioned. Kind of gives a sense to us about what kind of space you're developing. You can use those examples we went over at the beginning of the critique in the assignment, to kind of give you some ideas if you need some help. But I bet you probably already have some good ideas about that. Okay, so let's just take a look here. 2 point, you've got a 1 point here. This looks like oh, interesting. Um, a 3 point, 2 point. Oh, that's interesting too, this 3 point. I'm intrigued with your 3 points just because I think that it gives you such an interesting view into a space. So I also like this one too. I like the kind of complexity of the little the wall here, that divides the space. I think that's always a nice way, and then the doorway going through. That's always a nice way of creating a more kind of complex space. So I'd probably be inclined with either of these three because I just think they're just a little bit more unusual and original. So I might go with that. Um, when you're working with your forms, like your tables and chairs and everything, do just think about blocking them um, in 3 point, like using squares to block them in, and stick with square shapes or rectilinear shapes, to help you develop the space. I always, again, like you've heard me say this before in the critiques, when you're new to perspective, just work with geometric, like really geometric forms. Like maybe do some very simple ellipses because it's a requirement, but otherwise just stick with rectilinear forms. And I think you'll just be a lot happier with doing that, and it'll give you a lot more opportunity to practice perspective without getting frustrated. Okay, so those are my suggestions. I think you've got some good ideas here, and could again maybe just work a little bit more on some of these forms to make them a little more three-dimensional. Okay, Abby, you too. You just want to make sure that you've got your concept. Um, but I do like the spaces you're starting to develop. You've got this one's really nice. I like how you've got this foreground element of the door here. Different shapes overlapping. I like the window seat idea. I think that's really sweet. I think this would be a really nice choice. Uh, this one's also, I like the way you've worked with the space here of having, the walls kind of coming in and out, like so it just creates a more interesting space. And the sofa, yeah, this is a really nice space too. I like this. You could perhaps, think about a foreground element here. Um, bring something forward, like a table could be here, or a rug, or something right here to bring that forward. But this one's, yeah, so this one too, with this space, I like how you've got this cabinet here or shelving unit, uh, and the ceiling fan, it looks like. Um, yeah, so these are my suggestions. This feels a little static. There's nothing wrong with it exactly, but if I hadn't seen these sketches, which are more dynamic, um, I would have gone with this, but I think these are stronger sketches, and these probably are my two favorites, with this being the top one. Oh, and I don't remember if I mentioned it, but yes, you need to have a concept too. Okay, Eusenia, let's see. Oh, that's a nice idea. You drew a floor plan. Oh, that's a really great idea. That's remember what we did back in, was it week 1 when we did the floor plan with the elevation? Um, so you've got some good process stuff, like a discussion, which is awesome. But do say just a tiny bit more about your concept. You know, just like we talked, it doesn't need to be a lot, like a line or two, about the kind of spacing you're envisioning. Like what story is it going to tell? Let's see here. Is this it? Here we are. Yeah, okay. So let's see here. 3 point. That's cool. I like that one too. I like what you've done with the wall here. That's very interesting. These are all good. Um, I would be inclined to go with this one, or this one. So these are, I just think these are, again, if I had seen this one without seeing these three, I would have said, yeah, this is great. And I do like the foreground element here, which is really great. But somehow, no, I think there's just a little bit more maybe happening on the floor that's interesting. Hmm. I like this one too. I don't know. I'll leave it up to you. I think they're all really, I like what's happened, definitely what's happening back here with all of the detail. It's really nicely done. Um, and okay, yeah, good job. I think so. All you need to really do here to revise this particular assignment is just say a tiny bit more about the space. Okay, Louisa. In a basement setting, cozy, messy, bachelor pad, typical hangout room. Yeah, those are great ideas. Um, okay, yeah, this sounds a great idea. Let's see here. So I would say, okay, so I would say this is your strongest one at this point. The reason being is it has a little more scope, like a little more space. These are interesting compositionally, these other three, but they're tended to be a little too close into the space, which makes it hard to really work with perspective when you're only taking a sort of a small little chunk out of a space. So what I would recommend doing is developing so this would be a second one, except it's still a little close. Like when you're developing a space, start by just kind of like, let's see if we've got a little bit of where can I draw on here? Let me just get a new document here. I'll just get a blank piece of paper, so to speak. So, if you're doing a 2 point, for example, start with a back wall or corner, and then just develop your space, so that you get a start, getting a floor and, some walls, that kind of thing. If you're starting with a 1 point, then, again, sort of establish what you're going to be seeing in terms of, you'll see the back wall, put your horizon line in, just so you can really, and, you may not like what you can even have a scrap piece of paper, which is what I would do with this assignment, so I could actually do thumbnails one at a time. But, so you can start sort of developing a larger sense of space, even though that's not how you have to do all kinds of drawings, that is the way that it's really this working with perspective drawings is going to work best. So that's what I would probably do. I would probably replace these, at least these two, so that you get a little bit more um, variety, to choose from. And of the ones you have, this is probably definitely the one I would pick the most. But even with this one, I would pull out a little bit more so you get more space. Use these elements, but maybe we'll see more of the room, on this side and coming forward.